I love horror. Films, TV shows, books, but if you ask me, nothing quite beats the true terror of a horror video game. And there's been no shortage of greats over the years, from the original Alone in the Dark, Silent Hill, all the way through to games like Amnesia and the Dead Space series. Every Halloween, I dive into Steam and look for a new game to scare me senseless. But this year, I noticed something a little strange. When I went under the horror tag on the store and sorted by user reviews to discover the best of the best, I noticed I didn't recognize the majority of the games. Have we discovered a hidden trove of terrifying tales, or are Steam user reviews just rubbish? I thought I'd go through the supposedly best top 25 horror games, not bundles or DLC, just games, on Steam to ask, are they any good? And more importantly, are they scary? Welcome to the Steam 25 Horror. Sat at the number 5 spot is Tales of the Black Forest. In this story-driven RPG, you'll learn the story of Kiara, as she wakes up in a mysterious station and discovers she has magical powers. Accompanied by a collection of strange and quirky characters, you'll try to solve the mystery of the town, your own past, and attempt to lift a curse that lies over the land. So, is it any good? Before we dive into this one, there are two things I feel that have to be said up front. Firstly, this isn't really a game. I mean, it is, but in many ways it's closer to being a fully fledged visual novel. I'd say around 80% of the game is dialogue and cutscenes, not even interactable or changeable dialogue. Now that's not inherently a bad thing, but I feel it's worth noting. There isn't really any gameplay as much to talk about. You walk from dialogue to dialogue with one or two incredibly basic puzzles thrown in to break it up. It's more or less a 4-hour movie. The other thing? This game is very anime. Again, that's not a criticism, but as someone who's never been able to get into anime or similar stylings on any level, this was always going to be a hard sell for someone like me. If you are a fan of that kind of story, then this might play better for you, but I thought I should front load this by noting this really isn't my cup of tea. With those out of the way, let's get on with the review. As noted, the game isn't very, well, game. So let's quickly breeze through the gameplay section of this. It's fine. Similar to most RPG Maker or similar software-made games, you can go in 4 directions, interact, and that's largely it. This isn't the sort of RPG that'll see you manage a team and fight monsters. You'll enter a room, read for a while, interact with a note, and move on. Initially, I really struggled with the restrictiveness of the game. You can't leave areas till you've read everything and spoken to everyone very often. But once I stopped viewing it as a game and lent into the film element of it, that became much less of a problem. Visually, it's pretty good. Again, it's very similar in style to most RPG games of its kind. All the models and sprites look good, while some of the early sections can feel very average. Once you hit the later, bigger part of town, the art really picks up and looks generally more exciting and interesting. The music feels a considerable step above. There are some great tense tunes in there, but more often, it's the quiet, dreamy, almost fairy tale-like songs that lend a little weight to what's happening on screen. Okay, so the story. The 80% of this game. As mentioned, you arrive at a mysterious deserted town and start piecing together the mystery of what happened to it, and how 2 gas bombs are at the heart of the mystery. You quickly meet a strange woman who can turn into a small bird that travels with you in your pocket, and provides you with company as you avoid the spirits left behind. If this is already sounding a little out there, I can assure you it only gets weirder from there. As mentioned earlier, the story is very anime. The good and bad. On the one hand, the story is visually unexpected. The casual way people will introduce you to ghost trains and cat people while you slide from a forest to an ice field does keep you curious as to what could come next, as seemingly anything is on the cards. And, like the best of its genre, it has a point. The larger-than-life characters and visuals mask a story about greed and industrialization. All good stuff. On the other hand, the dialogue isn't great. Some of this can be pinned on translations, but on top of that direct and inhuman dialogue, every scene is overwritten to the 1000th degree. Each character spells out exactly what they're feeling, the other character repeats it back to them, and then they spell it out once more for them. If you remove the fluff, the story could easily be an hour and a half long. The insane unpredictability holds your curiosity, but it's hard to stay interested in a story where anything can just happen, and often randomly does. The pacing is also a little tough. The 3 chapters in many ways mirror the typical structure of a lot of famous movie trilogies. A good first film that sets up plenty, a better follow-up but often a more self-contained story, and a lesser final film that heavily links back to the first in some satisfying ways. Tales from the Black Forest hits these beats pretty perfectly, except all a little worse. The first chapter is fairly slow. There are a couple of good beats, but for the most part it's a great deal of setup and explanation as to the rules of your powers. You meet a new character, spend a great deal of time rescuing her in a grand finale, and end just as you start to dig into the mystery. It's a slow and not overly enthralling opener, and it's annoying that we spend so long meeting and setting up this character only for her to never come back after. The second chapter is much stronger, though again, much less connected to the main story. The entire second chapter feels like one long side mission, as the entire chapter is you trying to help a new character so she can give you an item to get to the final area. It's an annoying setup. However, the 4, 2 of whom are cats, new characters we meet do manage to, in spite of the dialogue issues, convey personality, and the events at the end of the chapter did even manage to stir some feelings in my cold, dead heart. It's not revolutionary, but it makes fun use of powers, flashbacks, and adds some new details to the mystery. The third chapter and epilogue again ditch the characters from before and introduce us to a new collection of characters. This entire chapter takes place in a much smaller zone, but across many more time zones. Here, the story struggles a bit as it plays catch-up, having given us a fairly separate story in the last chapter. We need to meet these new characters, we need to learn about them, while also learning in detail about one of the attacks, while also wrapping up the main mystery of the entire story as well as your past and powers. It's a lot of ground to cover, and it can often feel like the emotional beats the story tries to convey have no time to linger, as more exposition has to be thrown at you. The visuals and gameplay are fine, but the story is what this is all about. I, however, didn't find it to be a wildly successful one. If I could have played the second chapter on its own, I might have been more forgiving, but the long, overwritten dialogue, combined with seemingly never-ending waves of new characters and levels to the mystery, meant that by the third chapter, I was really just trying to rush to finish and get it over. But, is it scary? Like all the games I look at here, I switched all the lights off, plugged in some headphones, and really set the mood to spooky, to give the game the best shot it could at making me shiver. So, is it scary? A little. There are a couple of moments really early on and right at the start of the third chapter where the game settles for a moment and allows the music and scenery to create a lovely atmosphere. The forest initially is creepy to move through, and the hints that more has happened here that we know about really adds to that tension. There are a couple of clever, not overly aggressive jumps, all of which work nicely to get you a little more on edge as you wonder what could happen next. In these quiet, spooky moments, the game also has a habit of making things move right at the edge of your screen, just enough that you question if you really ever saw anything. These moments are very rare, but the couple of horror moments that do come up can be a little tense and creepy, though nothing entirely haunting. Would I recommend it? The best thing Tales of the Black Forest has going for it is its price. The price is only £3, and for the 4 hours it takes to get through it, that's some pretty good value for money. However, if, like me, you aren't really a fan of anime and the tropes of that genre, then this story likely won't resonate with you, and chances are you won't make it to the end. I doubt I would have if I hadn't been making this video. For what is mostly talking, the dialogue is overblown and simplistic for the most part, and the part that works a little better is buried in the middle. As horror, I again wouldn't recommend. The scares are just so far apart and ultimately only mildly effective. It takes a lot to get to them, and they aren't really worth it. Here's where it falls in the ranking table. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, a comment, and hey, maybe even subscribe. Hope this has been helpful, and look forward to seeing you next week with the next in the Steam 25 Horror. See you then.